again, this is Charlie Bellefontaine, and before I started speaking, Patrick said, let's see if we handle these things properly. But first, I want to introduce everybody, or let them introduce themselves. So, Steve, Greg, if you don't mind, you two take the lead, and they're with Real Brokerage, but give us more details about how long you've been in the business and why you're my favorite.
Awesome. First off, thank you guys all for having me today. Good morning to everybody else here in Chicago. My name is Greg Mazalewski. We are real estate brokers with Real, and we also are a part of the Kamar team here. My first start was in real estate in 2019, and what got me there basically was my long-term 10 years of union construction.
Nice.
Yes, so getting into the real estate space was pretty natural to me. When I started in 2019, I was given a really great opportunity to work with a top agent here in Chicago. And we started coaching in 2020 with the Mike Ferry program, and was kind of taking everything I learned, implementing everything, and fast forward to today, and we have over a couple hundred transactions done, and we also are on the listing side, helping our sellers, of course. We do with buy side, and then also, this year we're working on our investment strategies.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at and how we got to this point. And Steve and I have been connected and working together. And every time we sit down and talk, we're short on time, but we always have a true same perspective on our real estate passion and helping our clients and what we can do to serve, of course.
Sounds good. You're going to see this hour go by real quick, too. Steve, please.
Sure. Steve Davis, Kamar Group, Real Brokerage. And, my number is 312-513-6314. You can find me on my Instagram at I'm Steve Davis. And also happy to be here this morning.
Sounds good. Patrick, please.
Good morning, Patrick Loftus. I'm a real estate lawyer. Follow me on Instagram, Loftus_law, or on TikTok, Loftus Law. Come watch my shorts on YouTube.
Sounds good. And I'm a boomer, so I don't even know what Instagram is. I'm still on Facebook, and that's where you're going to have to follow me. My name is Charlie Bellefontaine. I own Chicagoland Home Inspectors. Our phone number is 312-544-9180. And Joey, give me the deets. What the heck is going on with all the markets and everything else this week?
Why, hello, Joey Mathews, VA Loan Nerd, NMLS 1330694. You can find me at thevalonernerd.com. You can call or text me at 630-235-2405. Well, the markets are, they're the markets. There's no doubt about it. We got more flip-flopping going on than John Kerry in 2004.
No.
Anyway,
That's a reference for all you youngins. Jeez Louise.
Yeah, you're going way back.
Deep. Yep. No, dude. So Trump has seemingly reversed course on everything that he said about Powell and China. So we are seeing market improvement today.
Okay.
We are currently up 40 basis points. We were up earlier in the day. We were up 70 basis points in the MBS market. So that's a good thing for rates. That's good for an eighth to a quarter % improvement in the rate market in general. We're pretty stagnant for the last hour, though. I mean, it was a huge rise overnight, and then we've just been, I don't want to call it a sell-off because we're still up so high compared to where we closed yesterday. But this week, we don't have a lot of data, nothing really important. We have jobs report coming in tomorrow. That's the only thing that really would be a market mover from what I'm seeing. Tomorrow being Thursday, April 24th, because we film on Wednesday, April 23rd. But that's really it. Next week we got we got the job openings and loss transition report. So that is a number that we would like to see in my world come in low, but it's better for people if that comes in high because there's more jobs that are open, so people are hiring. We also have on Wednesday when we're filming next week, so we'll talk about it next week. But our PCE, our personal consumer expenditures report coming in. Last month it came in lower than anticipated, along with consumer price index and the producer price index. So last month was pretty decent in the rate world, and then we lost a lot of it over this whole tariff thing. Let's go!
Get to work in here. So today I want to talk, and thank you, Joey, for sharing all that stuff with me. It's just, obviously the finances and everything that's going on with the country really do affect the real estate market. And keeping a bird's eye view of everything else, I can't express how important it is. So I don't want to turn what I'm about to say into a marketing thing, but one of the things that I do, we have a 15 inspector company. We're one of the larger companies here in the Chicagoland area. And we focus very heavily on marketing direct to our clients, so we have to value our reputation. And I try to do more and more to set our company apart from our competitors. Basically, is everybody, why do I want you to hire me as opposed to another home inspector? And one of the things that I do is a Zoom call follow-up with all of our clients. And at first, I just thought it was a nice thing to do. But then I started learning so much about communication. And when our inspectors say something versus what our clients are hearing and what they understand are sometimes two different things. And when I could take that time to spend an hour and a half with them, we can go ahead and bring those things up. So I'm going to bring up a few different things that I might have pulled you guys into these things for help. But nonetheless, these are common problems that people are having. And I want to do everything I can to educate people on the solutions to some of these things. So, and Greg, since you're in construction, I know Patrick is in construction. We had one where it was a townhome situation, but in this one, they were under townhouses. They weren't just next to each other like what I'm used to. So I would almost call it a condo, and I think we treat them as the same. This person was a renter. They were renting for 2 years, and they wanted to buy the apartment or condo or townhouse. They wanted to buy it. They hired us to do an inspection, and we found issues. There's always issues in every home, and we want to just come back to how bad is it? But one of the problems was in their bedroom. It was about a half-inch wide crack going up the corners of the wall, so from floor to ceiling, and then straight across the exterior wall on the ceiling, the joint between the ceiling and the wall. And it opened up a half-inch. And he said that he never saw that before, which was really interesting because to me it was just like really obvious that it was there. And, he's not using a real estate agent. They're doing everything for sale by owner. And, when he was talking to me about, what do I negotiate for and things like that, I'm like, I don't know. To me, there's so much more about when you're getting into negotiations and what you're going to be asking people for that you kind of have to know how much leverage or power that you have. And Patrick, I kind of want to start with you first. If you don't mind, give us a little bit of an education. What does leverage mean? And what does that mean to my clients?
I think it's the wrong question to ask at this stage of the game because you've not told me enough about the cause of that. There you go. So we're still in an information gathering stage at that point because I don't know if that's just a shrinkage crack as a result of, maybe when they constructed it rained a lot and you had some saturated framing lumber. Once that saturation evaporates out of the lumber, you will have shrinkage. All of the materials that you incorporate into a new build is going to have some level of ambient moisture, which because of how tightly we build homes these days is going to evaporate out and you have shrinkage cracks. A lot of people call them settlement cracks. You're more likely looking at what I would more accurately describe as a shrinkage crack. Now, if it's just that, which, look, I live in a building that it's basically concrete, and it's dry, like really dry. We had an HVAC person in to look at our furnace a couple weeks ago, and he's been in the building many, many times. He was saying he himself was remarking how dry it is, and they've even gone to the extent of installing. Charlie, you would know more about this than me, but like steam humidifiers as opposed to like the one. So like the next level. That's how dry it is, right? And the drier you're because concrete it continues to cure for years and years, 10, 20 years. So if it's just a shrinkage crack and we're primarily talking about a cosmetic issue, I mean, shoot, get a painter or a handyman in there. I'm
going to interrupt you real quick because I think I failed to ask my question properly. And because the client wants to know how much leverage they have to negotiate. And I wanted to direct that to Steve and Greg. But where I was going with you for is, what does it mean? What does leverage mean? What's the definition?
Well, what's the definition? The leverage is, I've got a good reason to ask you and perhaps convince you to do something.
Okay. So, and I like to refer to it as power. How much power do I have to get another person to do something? I want to negotiate. Can I get that person to agree with it? All right. And Stephen,
let me just interrupt,
please.
because the way I look at it, it really is, you can't just come up with like a number. My leverage is X or whatever, because there are far too many variables involved to even arrive at, well, because here's where you're going to end up, and here's where so many people end up, and it's a really unhelpful place to end up, where you end up with using the word should. Seller should, buyer should. The word, banish the word from your vocabulary. Should, fair, how am I being treated? These are all
principle.
Things. All of those things, I know that they feel very relevant. They are, in fact, very irrelevant. They're very low on the scale of the looking at things as a whole. So when you talk about what's my leverage, it's going to be different for each person. If you're an investor and you're just looking at what your ROI is, different investors will have different. If you're trying to buy and flip something, you will have a different idea than if you're trying to burr. Whereas if you are trying to live in a home, if you've got two other homes that you're highly interested in, but this just happened to be the one that you got into first and had an offer accepted, you may have more latitude to ask for things than if this is the only thing in the location you want to live in that is in your price range, that fits your family's needs. In that case, your leverage is a lot lower because you need this place a lot more than those other folks. So your question is one that I don't know how much time we have left, but I could fill the rest of it up giving you different ideas, going down different rabbit holes, giving examples. Everything is fact-based, determinative, and it's based on the people involved and what their needs are and the situation. And, what does that all mean? And I'll stop talking in a second. Really, you want to get people around you, because as a buyer or a seller of real estate, you're probably only going to do it a handful of times in your life. Gather people around you that have a lot of experience, have seen a lot of different things, have dealt with a lot of different people, situations, properties. They will have seen, they won't have seen the exact same thing, but what they will have seen in the past will echo what they're looking at now.
I always like to use the phrase, knowledge is power. And if you don't know, you need to get somebody who does know. So I want to go to the real estate agents. And I've always said this is where their value truly is, all right, is determining how much leverage and how much power that a potential buyer or seller actually has. So if you two don't mind, I would love you to, give me more details on this stuff. What are some of the factors that, like Patrick was pointing out, what are some of the things that influence whether it's the seller has the power or leverage or the buyer has the power or leverage?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick, you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of open-ended questions as far as leverage, right? But what we're seeing in today's market, and Steve, I'm sure you can agree with me as we're working with our buyers, is, from our experience and how we are shifting into the spring market, is definitely the sellers seem to have all the leverage right now. And I like what Patrick said. If you're a buyer and you're looking into a certain area or a certain neighborhood and you absolutely love the home, and these things do come up, that's why we always say, work with a great team, right? Work with your inspector. Work with an agent who has those experience. These cracks, these settling, these are very common. These are things that we see pretty often. And,
I'm going to argue that this is a half inch.
Sure.
It's not a hairline, and anytime we get over a quarter of an inch, then I'm lost in space. Warning, Will Robinson. The robot arms are flying all over the place.
I was told a half inch isn't that much.
That's
I'm not even gonna
that's
go there.
uncommon, to be honest with you. Half inch is uncommon because here's the thing: is where did that crack come from, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about all these older buildings in Chicago and how poorly they may or may not have built, of course. So when it comes to something half inch, again, always hire professional, hire these guys that have been doing it for years and years and years. They're gonna come across these things. They're gonna use the technology that we have these days, right? We're using infrared on walls. We're seeing moisture tools. We're using
I
all
want to know
those
more
things.
about your technology, though.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know about, like, for example, let's just say we take one of the high-rise buildings close to Soldier Field, and correct me if I'm wrong, but every one of those high-rise condo buildings is a market in itself. Is that a true statement or a false statement?
What do you mean by a market in itself?
Like, one building might be super hot in a buyer's market, and the other one right next door to it could be super cold in a seller's market. There could be like 50 units available in one building, and now they're all competing with each other, and the sellers lose power. or leverage.
Yes.
Let me describe it slightly different. You ever have someone that wants to compare, building by building based on price per square footage?
Right.
And you kind of have to disabuse them of the notion that every building is kind of the same in that regard.
Yes.
I think that might be a more, that description might fit what you have in mind better than what Charlie just said.
Right. So the whole thing, going off that question, basically, it's all about, sure, there could be a building that's, has a lot of distressed properties in it, so on, not as enticing. Maybe there's going to be a value there or a deal you can get, so to speak. But we're not talking about that per se. I mean, I understand your question. The whole thing is with the market, the way that leverage works, i.e. power, is all based on what's going on with sales, with sellers, with
This
buyers.
is what I'm going after, yes.
Right. So when you're talking about things like that, your leverage power, okay, is based off of what's going on in the market. Greg was explaining the fact of using, the professional. Make sure you have the education. Make sure you have the
accuracy,
professional you're
the
working
info.
with. Right. And then, but when it comes down to like leverage itself, it's all about how you know how to play the game. Why it's super important to have a professional in your corner on all aspects, attorney, real estate, agent, as well as lender, and of course the inspector. So the thing is that when it comes down to leverage or power, it has to do with how you're going to work that system, if you will. So as far as a buyer goes, they don't have a lot of leverage or power. Especially, you mentioned the fact of like them talking how excited they are about that one property they saw and they have to have it and so on. Well, if you give those, what I call cookies away, to that listing agent that's there and they hear that, they know that that buyer has lost all power. So it's really crucial that when you go see a property, you keep your emotions, keep your comments, everything to yourself until you can talk to your agent outside of the property. Now,
Back in the car, because the Ring camera is
Thank you.
going to
Sure,
pull all
away
that
from the other
conversation.
agent or away from someone else can hear you.
Yeah.
So that's really crucial. So leverage and power are all about how you play that, right? So as a good agent, as a good team, as a good, way to work that is to always tell your buyer when you're taking them out, listen, you may walk into this place and you're going to love this place, but don't give anything away because you never know who's listening and how you could lose leverage from that. But property's been on the market for 37 days, which in this market, that doesn't happen unless it's priced too high, okay? Or there's something wrong with the property. It's going to go, and it's going to go fast. But if it's sitting there and you're a buyer and you come in and you say all these wonderful things, this, that, blah, 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 you lose leverage immediately. And then we can't really help with that. I have a situation right now where I saw a property last night. The property has been sitting for a little bit, and there were Ring cameras inside. And I told my clients, listen, you got cameras inside. People can hear you. People can see things, so on. You may want to keep, let's talk when we get out of the house. They didn't listen to me. And they talked everything about how awesome it was, this, that, whatever. So now when I have to put an offer in today, I need to have that conversation with them and say, hey, listen, guys, here's where we're at. Yeah, it's been sitting in the market. Yeah, the market's hot, but now your leverage power may be a little bit more limited.
The
So-
seller is going to watch that footage.
Yeah.
I promise you. I've seen enough
Why wouldn't
posts
they?
on Reddit about that where they're like, oh, I watched the ring footage or whatever, the camera footage afterwards, and they gave everything up. I mean, Steve, how many times and you cringe, you want to just put your hand over the client's mouth where it's like they're like, oh yeah, this place is great, but I'm gonna tear out the master bathroom, and then they get to the inspection and they want to ask for
10 grand.
a bunch of stuff on the master bath, and you go, the ship has sailed. You gave that up when you had a bit too big of a mouth, and I have those conversations with sellers where it's like, so what has the buyer been a little loose-lipped about? Are they planning on doing work in the kitchen? Are they planning on whatever it is? That information, it's always surprising to me how often that information is at hand, and then we can easily just be like, hey, you're asking for something that we know you already budgeted for afterwards, and so you're going to use your budget.
Even with a seller's agent, you'd agree with this and tell your own story on this one. But the fact is when you talk to a listing agent, you try to get more and more information out of them, so you know how to put the offer in, how to deal with it, knowing what kind of leverage you may or may not have as well. So when the agents talk too much, then you're like, oh, well, look at that. We can do this instead because I know that this is what is really important. And I know what, you know what I mean? So as a good agent, as someone who's been in the industry for a while, how do you personally handle that situation where you're talking to an agent and they give away too many cookies, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, just again with the word leverage, right? For example, you have a seller that the house is vacant and they live in another state. They may or may not be in a rush to get the property sold. They may have some time. Or you may have a seller that's going to be relocating for a job, and they absolutely need to sell in 3 weeks, right?
Or they don't care because it's already been, the terms that they're going to get have already been established by the relo company, and so it's just
Another
a
good
relo
point.
company.
Yeah, relo is awesome because of the fact of
Urgency, right?
You have the urgency, and you can play the game because technically, most likely that client, that seller, doesn't own the property anymore once you sell it. Anyway, it's the bank, they don't care, or the relo company. So it's a beautiful thing, and you have a lot of leverage. Just extra paperwork.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, same thing, right? When are the sellers looking to close, right? What does their time frame look like? Those things are super important when you're a buyer and you're going to be putting in the offer, right? How much earnest money are they looking for? A great agent that is representing a seller is going to hop on a phone with the buyer's agent that's experienced, that wants to make the deal happen. And that's all about creating the relationships with those agents. And then we continue to work with those agents time and time again, right? So we submit an offer. And they say, okay, I have 5 offers, and Greg and Steve are the top 2 offers, and guess what? I've already done deals with them. I'm comfortable with working with them. So there's leverage for us that we can use as great professionals too.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to expound on that. And Joey, I'm going to ask that you step up here for a second. I really believe that that's our job. All right, that's my job as a home inspector, is to give my client as much knowledge so I can improve their leverage when it comes to negotiating. I don't get involved in negotiations, but I get involved in the information and being as accurate as possible and complete as possible. Patrick gives a lot of knowledge when it comes to the attorney stuff like that. Joey, what do you do to give your client more leverage when they're buying a home?
Well, I don't issue toilet paper. I go ahead. I don't issue toilet paper.
What does that mean? Oh, I got it. Never mind.
Pre-approval, yeah.
You
yeah,
actually use
pre-approval.
those paper documents, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so it's almost like you're dealing with people's lives, so you take it that seriously. But I communicate up front, right? I always tell any buyer agent I'm working with, any buyer I'm working with, as soon as an offer goes in, I need to know, I need to be CC, because I need to call the list agent either as they're reviewing the offer, before they're reviewing the offer. Because if your communication right up front like that is that quick, and you can explain your client's situation, hopefully, the list agent has the time to hear you. At least that takes, I've never worked with this lender off the table in terms of, is there going to be communication here? Because again, like what Greg just said, the communication between him and Steve, the communication between him and any other agents that he's worked with in the past, it matters on that offer. Because again, this goes, it's this circle of communication, right? So, okay, I have this offer from Steve, but why is this a Chase pre-approval? Why would Steve work with a Chase pre-approval? What is going on here, right? That would make me nervous. As if I'm an agent, I don't like that. I would imagine that there's certain lenders that are going to get preference. I know that there is a agent in Chicagoland that I closed 4 lists for her last year. I have never done a buy transaction with her, but she accepts my offers over other offers because she knows how I work. So
That's powerful.
Which shows you how good you are as a lender, for sure. And it goes to say, if you are the agent, the seller's agent, and you get a phone call from the lender where the buyer is trying to buy your property, it goes a long way. Because then, A, you're doing work where I didn't have to. In other words, you're calling, you're preempting.
Yeah.
And then B is the fact of, as a lender, you clearly want to make sure that I'm comfortable knowing who I would potentially be working with as an offer coming to a property. And it's funny that Joey just mentioned that, because 3 days ago, I put an offer in. I called the agent ahead of time. I had my lender call them ahead of time. Well, his lender call them ahead of time. And she's like, man, I've got 3 other offers and no lenders have called me, and I appreciate the way you do business. I'll be in touch. And guess what? 4 offers, we won it, and we weren't the highest offer. So the point there is exactly what Joey said, which is knowing those people, knowing those lenders, knowing the connections, the rapport, so on, makes a huge difference.
Well, the margins can be quite thin on these multiple offer situations, and if we're within 1-2% on price, and the rest of the terms are kind of a wash, it would not. I would not be surprised to find out that the offer with the most solid lender won out, even though it may not be the highest one. And just like what you're describing, it does make a big difference. And I think if you're not really in this sort of arena, it may seem like a follow-up phone call is just a courtesy. I mean, it can make or break you.
I think it's hugely important. In fact, I actually pulled Joey in on a Zoom call I was doing yesterday. All right, this is a home in Glenview, and they did not use Joey as the mortgage person. They used another company.
Shame.
Yeah, whatever. It seemed like, because she did make the comment that my lender called the listing agent, we weren't the best thing. They explained the VA loan and realized that Joey does other loans too, but quite frankly, if you've been listening to everything here, nobody knows these things, how they work and how they manage them better than Joey does. So, she had questions and she was getting some information and making statements that I learned from Joey that are not true, and I just wanted to bring him on the call. But Joey, can you expound a little bit about, what was going on, the good and bad with that conversation from yesterday?
I mean, for sure. So, and one thing I'm always very upfront about is the company generally does not matter. It is going to be the individual lender that matters.
That needs to be said in all of us. It's always going to be the person, the attorney, the real estate broker, the home inspector, everybody. It's the individual, not always the company. And I'm not trying to diss Kamar Group, all right? I know you guys work hard recruiting, some very caring and passionate people. I apologize for interrupting, Joey.
And that's a good point. I'm going to interrupt a second time. A second interruption.
Poor Joey.
Interruption to the interruption. Let's go.
When someone does say they want to use Chase, that I get the same reaction that Steve had. But my next question is: are you in their wealth management? Are you in their private, whatever you call it? Their
high net worth private network.
My nose.
You have
is
to have
way up
$250,000 with Chase in order to be in private network.
Well, whatever
not
it
easy.
is,
Private banking.
But here's the thing. The difference between
Good to know, Charlie. Thanks.
The difference between the loan officers you get as just your average retail customer walking into a Chase branch versus you are in their private, wealthy, snooty program is night
Stop
and day.
dissing my program. I
No.
like that program.
No,
Congratulations.
I will not stop dissing
Yeah, right?
that program.
Great. Thanks.
Moneybags,
Humble brag,
Bellefontaine,
let's go.
strikes again.
Moneybags Fontaine over there.
I don't know nothing.
Joey, do you remember at all what you were asked to answer?
Nope, sure don't. So I'm just gonna
Cool.
talk.
Give me the low down of what happened when you were on the call with me. What you heard
No,
and what
so-
you said.
For sure. So I'm super excited that the person at the other company was a advocate for the veteran, right? That matters. In
Doesn't
terms of advocacy and knowledge, there can still be a gap there. So when we were going over the inspection report and some things are getting brought up, the appraiser, in 99% of the time, does not have to come back out to do a reinspection of the property, right? The VA encourages lenders to self-certify repairs. Or what I like to do, what I prefer to do, is when it's possible to do what's called an MPR waiver, a minimum property requirement waiver. There were some of the things that were on the appraisal report. I know in that crawl space, an appraiser's never going to see that, right? That's only something that's going to be on the inspection. There was a water damage in the back corner of the crawl space, and an appraiser's not going to go into the back corner. I couldn't see it until I saw Charlie's close-up of it, right? Handrails, you can do a minimum property requirement waiver for handrails, right? The veteran signs a request along with what's called a hold harmless letter. You send it into the VA. The VA updates the notice of value and waives that requirement. So advocacy and knowledge are different things. I'm excited for the lender to advocate. I would like to talk to the lender more about the education because there were some things that the lender could have done to help make the loan easier after appraisal. If it got to appraisal, obviously, I think this one's going to cancel, but still, you know.
No, I think she actually, after you hung up, she changed her mind on everything else. She
Oh,
wants to
beautiful!
move
Let's
forward.
go.
Well, the whole thing was, you know, she didn't think it would go through because she was under the impression that the seller has to fix everything that's in the report. And that we write on
And
there.
you know what?
And these guys are all grinning over here for those who listen on the radio because they know that's not true.
It just sounds, when you say that, I'm just like, oh God, whoever was her lawyer must have had to spend
And
just
properly
ages,
informed, yeah.
Or their agents.
Not
just
informed.
ages, you know, just reorienting the person. And
That's what
you know,
I was doing.
How's the agent, Joey?
I don't know who the agent is. I
He's
was
not
literally
involved
on
in the
their-
transaction.
Well, He's not.
Steve
He's
loves
just
that word
involved.
preemption, and you know, it's like
Hey, you never know.
You save yourself a ton of time by kind of giving someone the lay of the land beforehand instead of letting them just try to figure out for themselves and end up with the wrong impression in that way.
But it's very important, and Greg will agree with this. And we talked about this morning.
Greg, will you really agree with this?
Yes, he will. Trust me.
Most of the things Steve and I agree with.
Is that you have to have someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
You have to have a professional. And if you don't know the answer, do you just give them an answer? No. You say, that's a great question. Let
Make
me
stuff
find that
up.
out.
What are you talking about?
and I'll-
MSU.
Let me find that out, and I'll give you a call back and let you know what's going on.
You obviously didn't go to the same real estate school as most of the other ones because, you know, usually it's like, nah, it's fine.
Yeah, I got a guy.
It's no big deal.
Well,
In my 30 years, I've never seen this.
there's agents out
Oh,
there for sure that do that.
Joey,
I
I'm
actually
about
used
to get on a
that the
plane
other
and slap
day.
you around.
There are agents out there. There are agents out there that have been doing this for whatever amount of years, and they're multimillionaires, and they still do not care about their clients, but yet they somehow are successful.
Got a great sales funnel.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and going back to this particular deal, and I'm going to change to another deal real soon, was they were misinformed and they needed to be educated and stuff like that. And that's why I kind of want to get back focusing on that education portal, just to give somebody the way to learn about these things so they can make the better decisions and also advocates to be there. So I want to thank you all for answering that one. And now I want to bring up another situation. This is on the listing side, something that was happening. I got a phone call. It was Sunday? Yeah, it was Sunday.
Ugh.
Yeah, I know, right? Usually I don't answer the phone on Sunday. She did leave a
Plus it was
message. I
Easter.
listened
Easter
to it.
It was
Sunday.
Easter.
Man, people got Latin.
Oh,
there.
you know what? I take it back. It was Saturday. Thank you, because that was Easter. So this was Saturday. Everybody in the family was out of the house. I was alone, so normally I would spend time with them, and I wouldn't do this. This was up in Highland Park, and somebody listed their house. It was with, I don't want to mention the real estate brokerage on there, but it was one of the technical real estate brokerage companies out there. She had it on the market for about 3 weeks, and she didn't get any offers. It was a typical 2-story, but roughly about 2,500, 3,000 square feet in Highland Park. Great community, and she ended up putting a new roof on. And there was nothing wrong with the old roof, except that there was a leak at one time. Somebody patched a leak, and there was a difference in the colors of the shingles where they did the repair. But it stopped the leak. And she thought that was the reason why nobody was bidding on her home. And I'm like, oh, no.
It's the price.
It's whatever it is, it's not going to be because of the roof. And we need to talk to somebody. And I was just trying to gear her towards somebody that I trust and I value, and for those that know me, I'm very prejudiced against just about every professional, including my own, in real estate. I think most people involved in real estate are just horrible actors, uneducated, and I despise them, all right? But when I find those few that truly care about the clients and truly care about knowing more, doing more, then I try to build a solid relationship with them.
There's dozens of us.
There's half a dozens of you. All right.
True
So
thoughts.
she ended up putting a new
Charlie
roof on
Bellefontaine.
there. She ended up putting a new roof on the house. She thought that there was a ridge cap flashing that raised the top of the ridge board up a little bit. She didn't understand that that's normal. That's the proper way to do it. She thought that they did something wrong. I went over there. I talked to her about it. But then I'm listening to everything else that's going on. And she did fire the first real estate company. The sign was still in her front lawn. And she's going to go with another one. But it's more, just somebody that she knew as a child. And I'm like, that's not a good choice. And I don't know. Would you tell somebody to replace a roof when they're listing a house in a desirable area like
No.
Highland Park? Okay, that's what I said too.
It depends on the
Give me
market
the
too.
deeds.
It depends on the property. It depends on the price. It depends on the finishes. It depends on all those things. The roof doesn't make or break. Same thing as a crack. Same thing as like a leaky faucet, whatever.
Furnace, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone. So I'll let you answer this, but what would you say is most of the time when sellers are always asking us when we're sitting down at the table to take their listing on, what are the things they're saying? What should we do here? Should we do something this, that, whatever? I mean, what is the biggest thing you get?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the price and we're sitting down with a new client and going over that plan of action of how we're going to get the home sold right, condition of the property is important. And I ask them, the kitchen hasn't been updated. Do you plan on doing any extra work to it? Do you plan on repairing the drywalls? Are you plan on doing any tile? Well, no, we would just like to sell the property as is. Okay, well, great. Well, now that we know that these things, buyers are going to come in there and already know, hey, we would like to update the kitchen, or, we would like to, add a new roof. The roof looks like it could be used for 20 years, or what's not, of course, right? So those are all things that make the property sell, right? Because we're going to base those improvements with the price.
There it is.
And, so it always is going to boil down to the price. Location is going to be your number one, right? And then you're going to go through the condition, and then the price is going to justify everything as well. So if you're priced correctly, the buyers understand, okay, it is an older home, the roof hasn't been done, we're going to put this money aside, or, we're going to have our great agent negotiate those things for us. So it all, those things boil down when you get down to the seller and really communicate with them.
There are 2 reasons why a property doesn't sell. Charlie,
Write this down. I'm going to go for money
okay?
is the one thing, so it's going to be the price. And then curb appeal is my second guess.
What do you think?
How did I do?
You got one out of the
You got
two.
one.
Damn it. All right, I'm not a good real estate agent. I'm sorry.
So there are 2 reasons a property doesn't sell. You can't change the location. The location is what it is, right? So it's going to be price or it's going to be condition, right? Those are the 2 reasons.
I can move to another trailer park.
Be nice.
So, well, Highland Park, I don't think that's what the case is. But
Yeah, probably not.
the point is like, so a roof, you went back to that question that you asked, Charlie.
Yeah.
And as Greg said, it's all going to be about the condition of the property. if you're making any upgrades, you're not making any upgrades, so on. An agent that tells you to do something major that's going to cost a lot of money, they need to explain two things to you. One is, do you really need to do that in order to sell the property? Number one. Number two is, if you put that 20 grand in, are you okay with not getting it back?
Yeah.
Because there's no guarantee. I have a neighbor right now that wants to sell possibly, and she's like, I think I should redo the kitchen. And I was like, you can redo the kitchen for 40 grand, but are you going to get that 40 grand back? Right?
Probably not.
Right, exactly. So sell it as is.
Yeah.
Take a little less, maybe 20 grand less, but then you're not spending 40. Now, does it mean that if you redo the kitchen, if you're not going to get more buyers? No, of course not. Maybe you will get more buyers. Maybe you'll get more money. But what happens if the market changes?
Yeah.
What happens if something all of a sudden flips and then you're,
Sure. Or what if the buyer doesn't like white shaker cabinets in the kitchen, right? And all of a sudden you put 40 grand in it,
Right.
and then they come into the house and say, okay, well, I'd like to redo the kitchen.
That was
Well,
my wording exactly. Well,
Yeah.
how do you know somebody's going to like that color roof?
or you're paying
Exactly.
for someone's premium.
Maybe they want an architectural roof, right? Maybe they want a cedar shake roof. Maybe leave those things up to the.
expensive.
We would like to leave those things up to the buyer, and that's why the property's priced as it is, because we understand the buyers want to come in, put their own personal touches on it, right? So you're not going to impress every single buyer by redoing the kitchen. And here's another thing: is the time, right? They may want to list it, right when the market's super, super hot, right? And then all of a sudden they're getting delayed because they have to wait for the kitchen to be done. They have to pull the permits. Their contractor has other projects going on, vice versa, So I think you guys get what I mean.
Yeah, if you end up on the market in October instead of March, you have made a mistake. Even whatever your strategy was, it probably did not. It's probably not going to pan out. And here's another thing, and I hate to bring up the HGTV, the home porn that they put on,
Bring it up, 'cause it's
on
legit.
TV at every. But like,
No, no.
if
If
you ever
you
seen
could
that
say
show,
that
Love It
word.
or List
You
It,
could say that.
I can say porno.
All right.
If you've ever seen that show, Love It or List It, they always end up staying in the house that gets redone. Like, I don't think I've ever seen even one time where they decide to move. So if you're gonna go down that road, just remodel the house and stay there.
Enjoy it,
But
yeah.
otherwise, it's the equation is the amount of money I have right now and the amount of money I sell my property for. The difference is how much more money I'll have, and if I take down the money I have right now to get a higher price, if it's just a wash, I mean, you just paid money to get a headache, and it's not worth it.
Yeah, because you never know what you're going to run into.
And-
You being a construction guy,
There's always a problem. There's always something that comes up.
There it is.
And here's the thing. And Steve, Greg, this is what you guys run into, I'm sure, which is, people psychologically, it's we're predisposed to believing that something we have is worth more just because of what we have invested
Once or twice.
into it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, but you don't understand. It's got this little cubby where you can store extra stuff, so it's got to be worth more than my next door neighbor's place that doesn't have that cubby,
Well,
and you're just like,
Yeah, perfect
think so,
example
bud.
is what happens when you're selling a house that has a pool.
Oh, this house did have a pool, by the way.
Oh, shocking.
yeah. Well, the more specialized you get, the less potential buyers there are out there. I remember
So
when
the
my
pool
folks-
doesn't necessarily mean the value goes up, correct?
Probably not. I mean,
Exactly.
it's going to be an added value to some people, and it's going to be a negative to other
Yeah.
people. For example, my parents, my dad's stepmom, when they went to sell their place out in McHenry, they had a pole barn and they had a horse arena. Now, in dollars and cents, it costs more to have those things on your property than it does to not. But if you don't have horses, what are you doing with that? Nothing. So it's like you really have to find. I mean, you want to talk about a small percentage of people. I mean, to those people, they'll be like, oh, amazing. I don't have to build my own horse arena. But raise your hand if you know someone that is in need of a horse arena right now.
Yeah, pretty slim.
No.
Oh, sorry. Well,
Joey, do you
I
know
mean,
anyone?
1 in 4, which
I
do.
do
I
have
actually
one.
have one.
I do have one.
I have a buyer
All right,
that
Patrick,
is
2 and
looking
5.
well,
for that.
if this were 2016, I'd be like, Steve, you're in luck, buddy.
All right. Well.
But it's not, so sorry.
Yeah.
Wah, wah.
Oh Oh well.
And Charlie, just to circle back on, the original question, of course, is should the homeowner do those repairs, right? So, just a small example is we had a listing in Palatine, and the seller was deceased, and the carpets were terrible. You can tell they were terrible. And they asked me, Greg, do you think we should replace the carpets? And my answer was, well, no, because here's the thing is not every buyer loves carpet. So what are we going to do? Change the carpets, invest the money, again with the timing, and just like myself,
Just get 'em clean,
I can't stand carpets because I have high, my allergies. So
See, now that's interesting you say that. I sold my condo in Northbrook, and the real estate agent that I used at that point in time, we ended up hiring a painter and just put neutral colors up there, and it wasn't, hideous. We did put all new carpeting in. It was cheap, basic carpeting. And she made the argument that when people walk in here, you got to get them to fall in love with the place first. And she stayed very neutral. She said this is kind of like building a relationship, because we started the conversation of why don't people do pre-listing inspections and get in front of these things? And her argument was because you got to get them to like the house before they find out the bad things about the house. And then they got to decide to still do it. And it's kind of like building a relationship.
What year was this?
Good question. 2018.
Yeah,
Well,
different time.
Yeah, it's different
place.
time. Plus, I mean,
That's important. And this is where I'm going with the leverage. And this is what I wanted to get from you two.
yeah.
And Joey, too. The technology, how does that matter?
Well,
Good
back on
point.
the
Thank
on
you.
the carpet situation, it's all going to boil down to the price, right? Because all the buyers are looking at these homes on Zillow, Redfin. They're already aware when they see these photos that the carpet needs to be changed, right? So they understand going into it, but they also are looking at it like, okay, well, this property is also $10,000 less than the other one down the block, and we understand it needs carpet. So when they're coming in, they already have that expectation of, okay, I'm going to put a hardwood in here, or I'm going to change it. So in this case, the seller was deceased, the property was vacant. We knew that we priced it correctly, and we're going to sell it as is. Everything was out in plain sight and day for them.
When I was a kid, my mom, who was a realtor, she bought a place, and she took my sister and I to this place. It was a townhouse in Rolling Meadows. This would have been probably 1988. All right, so
Great year.
she takes. Well, it was a year.
I see
So-
I started in the fire department in Northbrook.
Yeah,
I was born.
That was Camaro,
you were
Charlie.
born then?
Charlie did have a
was trying to figure that out. I was looking
four-cylinder hatchback Camaro back then. So
Get
Like,
it up.
Smokey the Bandit type?
it was Smokey the Bandit, but it was a
slower.
four-cylinder.
Ooh.
It was
You
that
could
thing
get-
got 0 to 60 in 8 days.
Yeah,
All right,
you're buying a chassis
Hey,
with
but
just
good on
a
gas.
dog in it.
great on gas.
Yeah, great
not
on gas.
really, not really.
No?
These were dogs, man. You used to be
Yeah.
able to get a Mustang. You get any of these like muscle car types with
GTO.
with four bangers in them, just because they knew you wanted to look cool in them.
But
But
it
like
won't go.
like if you had a Mustang back in the '80s and it didn't have the 50 decal on the side,
I
it
gotta
was
remember that.
embarrassing.
You
Yep.
could buy those. So they even sell Toyota decals that people are putting on the back of Cybertruck.
Yeah.
Oh, I
I've
saw
seen
that for
that.
Teslas. They were putting like
Yeah.
the Audis and. that's
Joey,
not
are you
bad
putting
idea.
No
Audi
way.
on the
Yeah,
back of
Joey?
your truck?
Oh yeah, you'll never
He
figure
won't
out
even
that
talk
it's not
to
a
us
side.
anymore.
Joey?
I think we're gonna make him
Mine's
mad.
wrapped in the VA loaner. There's nowhere to put anything. Like, I'm
it's a-
good, man.
Oh, that's
I've been
cool.
flicked off. I've been cut off.
It's
We're
a
having
VA.
good
Same,
time.
Joey. Same, Joey.
It's a VA loan nerd brand.
I don't understand.
vehicle.
You have a truck. How do people cut you off?
Oh, they do.
I get
Oh,
the middle
because
finger a lot.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's because you
that's
don't drive
okay.
yourself anymore.
And that's the driving finger, by the way. If I broke that thing, I wouldn't be able to drive. I need it. I need them both.
So we stepped foot in this house,
Thank
and
you.
this guy was an absolute hoarder. I mean, it was disgusting. He had to there were paths through all the crap that this guy had piled up in every room. And my sister and I are walking around this place just horrified. There's no way we're living here, right? It had green shag carpeting, and that's before shag came back. This was
Brady Bunch.
This was original when they built the place in the 60s, kind of probably he had a rake somewhere in that pile of trash, because that's what you did with shag carpet back in the day. But we were like, oh, this seems like what? But my mom had, being in the business, she was like, you guys, and she told us, you have to trust me that I have a vision. And that this is not how it's going to be when we live here. And of course she was right. We put new carpet in, she painted the cabinets, redid the parquet floors, stained them a more contemporary color. And it did turn into a really nice place to live. But if you don't have that kind of vision, you will walk right in that townhouse. You'll be like, ew, shag carpeting, and you're pieced out. But I guarantee you that she got one heck of a deal on that place, because she understood that the amount that she would get off of market value, if it were like in great updated condition, was enough to make it valuable, that it would cost less cash to get the property into, and ultimately, that's one great way to build equity in a property. So,
and I don't want to sound cheap, but it really is all about the money.
When
you're buying or selling, of course,
it totally makes sense. And the fact that you just brought up, the fact of like, it's got shag carpeting and it's an old kitchen and it's got an old bathroom, it's got this, got that. Guess what? There are buyers out there for it. You just have to price it right. And yours truly is going to be looking for that aspect, so that it's one of those where you fix and you hold and you rent it out and use it as positive cash flow, so on. So the point is like that sells. The fact you don't have to change the carpet, you don't have to paint, you don't have to do all these things.
Yeah, I mean the effort involved as well. If you're not gaining significant return on any of that work, just price it properly, because if it's a wash, or if even it's just a small gain, the amount of effort, you're going to have people in your property, you're going to take work off, you're going to go through all of this time and effort and expense, and for what? So, just because you got, I don't know, 10, 15,000 less than was the top, that you saw your, cousin who lives 3 blocks over sold their place for, a little bit more, and you don't have bragging rights at the next cookout. It's like, you're going to end up shooting yourself in the foot.
No, and it is an emotional thing. And Joey, this is where, back in the fire service, military, things like that we learned is the human brain physically, and this is a fact, the human brain physically cannot respond emotionally and logically at the same time. Now, I know most married men, and yes, I'm going to get beat up by my wife for this, are going to say, oh, no, my wife can do that easily. They can't, all right? So what we have to do is we need to get everybody on the logical side.
I'm not endorsing
this
that.
is a business transaction. I know I am in deep trouble right now.
You're way out on that limb.
I am.
Honey, you're so smart.
I think she's the most wonderful person in the world. And I love her to death.
My wife can be angry at me and be nice to somebody else at the same time.
I second that.
I've seen stuff like that happen too. So. But we are getting towards the end of our time right now, so we only have about a minute left of time, and I am going to want to close this up. Joey, if you don't mind, can you give us your contact information again?
Joey Mathews, VA Loan Nerd. You can call or text me at 630-235-2405. All the social medias is at the VA Loan Nerd. You could call my son when he's on the radio with me, or the VALoanNerd.com. Going on mute.
Going on mute. I love it. Greg, please give us the deets.
Yes, Greg Vasilewski, Kamar team. Best way to reach me, text message. It would be the quickest, of course, right? 630-835-5837. Thank you guys so much for having me.
One more time on the phone number, please.
630-835-5837.
Thank you, Steve.
Sure. Steve Davis, Kamar Group, Real Brokerage. You can find me at, what was that, Instagram. I'm Steve Davis. And then also my phone number, 312-513-6314. That's 312-513-6314.
It is weird to me that Joey sets up in his son's bedroom to record.
Yeah, why does he do that?
Does he really?
No, he doesn't.
I don't know you.
Quick negotiating tip, because we're supposed to go a minute long. Silence is one of your best strategies. People abhor a vacuum. If you want to get people to blab about stuff that they probably shouldn't be blabbing about, just shut your mouth and let them fill the void. All right. I know you'll also feel a little awkward, but it's okay, because they'll blink first, unless they are listening to this, in which case, good luck. That's going to be a long phone call where no one talks. But use that silence to your advantage. Use their discomfort to let them blab about things that you can use for your client. For all these kinds of golden tips, find me on social media, Loftus_law on Instagram, Loftus Law on TikTok. Look at my shorts on YouTube.
Sounds good. And my name is Charlie Bellefontaine. Special thank you to Devin Tingle for making everything work. And I